The end of the lunar cycle and the beginning of the next one is upon us, making this time ripe for our shadow work and releasing. Now, these techniques perfectly complement each other because while what we discover during our shadow work can be reintegrated back into the psyche and the consciousness, all of those extra emotions and energy that are negative and tied to that can then be released afterwards. That leaves us space to draw more into the energetic body. So while this is typically felt and done near the end of a lunar cycle for many people, the reality is that this kind of work can be done at any time. And we'll be talking about all of this and more in tonight's episode. So merry meet, I'm Aislin, this is Ask Aislin, and I am here tonight talking about shadow work and releasing techniques. So, saying hello to those who are joining us live. If you're live here, you can say hi in the chat. I see Cindy's here, and Jamie and Kurt. At least in the chat, I could see you guys. Hi, everybody. So, if you like what you hear, leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere during the video. This will help us get out to the feet of more people. And of course, those here live, leave questions and comments for the Q&A, and I'll be watching the chat as we go. Okay, so let's dive in. We've got a lot to talk about, and it's a busy day for us here. Some of you may notice we're live at 90 minutes early, and that's because we have a special dark moon ritual for our Shadow Seekers membership right after this. And so we had to squeeze this episode in a little early. But it's perfect timing. I wanted to talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing in that ritual later. And for those of you who are not in our membership, hopefully you get some ideas of some of the work that you can do as well. So, how does shadow work and releasing techniques, how do they go together? Now, shadow work is typically done in order to uncover unconscious motivations or unconscious aspects of ourselves, things that are essentially going on underneath the surface that we are maybe only peripherally aware of, and in some cases, maybe completely unaware of at all. Now, our shadow work helps us understand what's going on. It helps us give insight into our behaviors, into our motivations, into our thoughts, into our actions and reactions, right? And what we're going to often find when we do this kind of work is there's this great freedom afterwards. Before our shadow work, it feels like everything is kind of being done to us. We may get the sense of feeling out of control, like that we have no control over anything and we're kind of at the whim of the universe. And we may feel like we can't really control those reactions, motivations, emotions. They're just happening, right? But what shadow work provides for us are these aha moments. And when those happen, then that feeling of being out of control is no longer the case. And to me, that's the real gift of it. So if you talk to people who've done a lot of shadow work, one of the things that they'll tell you is that they don't react in the same way to things that they might have reacted to before. And I can tell from my own experience as well that this is definitely the case. It doesn't mean that we don't get irked or annoyed at times. It doesn't mean that we're not affected by things. It doesn't mean that we don't have continual work to work on. But what it does mean is all of those things that once troubled us, they start to fall away over time. We find that we're more in control of our emotions, we're more in control of our reactions, and therefore we feel more in control of our lives. And to me, that is a gift that then helps aid us in our spiritual evolution. Because if we're not worried about all of this mundane stuff, we're not trying to constantly kind of balance our emotions or change them to hopefully be more productive, we have more energy freed up to do the kind of work that we're here for, that spiritual work, that spiritual evolution. Now, what we may find though after our shadow work, and this is, I've talked about this before in some of our free public workshops. I certainly talk about this in the Shadow Seekers membership. But what we may feel is that even after doing some of that shadow work, there's still something left. There's still perhaps some negative emotions or negative energy that surrounds the issue, and we hold it in our emotional and our energetic bodies. So we don't just have this physical body, we also have the subtle bodies, the emotional, the mental, the energetic. Now, these bodies will hold charge from previous traumas, from experiences that we've had that may have been negative. They can hold things from childhood. They can even hold things from past lives. So this is where the releasing comes in. So after our shadow work, we will find that we may be able to let go of some of that residual energy in a way that we weren't able to before. So before we may have said, I want to let go, and we would try, and it didn't really work. But after our shadow work, what we find is that becomes easier. We are better able to let go. So this is why shadow work followed by releasing work can have such a powerful impact on the entire process. Now, this is a technique that we frequently do in our Shadow Seekers membership, and I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're about to do a big releasing ritual right after this in just a little over an hour. But how does the whole process work? So that's kind of what I wanted to lay out here. So we just have a video where, we're talking about what would you do if you wanted to pair your shadow work with releasing work, how would you do it? Especially if you didn't have someone to guide you. So generally, shadow work sessions will fall into two different categories, spontaneous versus non-spontaneous. Now, both are productive and both can happen, but generally the spontaneous sessions come after doing a lot of work. They come out of nowhere. They will typically, and like I said, they will typically be more common in people who have done a lot of regular shadow work. It doesn't mean that if you're just starting out, you can't have a spontaneous shadow work session. You absolutely can. But they're going to be more common in the people who are doing this work cyclically. Now, when we have a shadow work session, especially one that I would consider spontaneous, it can feel like a cosmic download. All of a sudden, you may know the answer to something that has been troubling you deeply for some time, something that you never could gain insight into. All of a sudden, it's like that aha moment, that light bulb goes off, and you may all of a sudden understand where your kind of more negative traits come from. You may all of a sudden make a connection all the way back to when you were 5 years old. You may make a connection to a past life or repeated patterns in a past life out of nowhere, right? Now, what generally has happened is that we've become so receptive to kind of just the energy, to our ability to connect to the unconscious, that all of that information begins to come out. And that's usually what's happening during a spontaneous session. So here's an example of my own. During a full moon ritual, and this is going back a couple of years ago, during this full moon ritual, I realized that the voice in my head of self-doubt, that kind of nagging voice of self-doubt, especially regarding my intuition and my spiritual practices, was not my own voice, it was my father's. And I could very clearly understand that in a way that I had never understood before in that one moment, standing there doing a full moon ritual on the beach. Now, I didn't ask for insight into it. It wasn't even a question that was part of the ritual. But out of nowhere, I had that spontaneous understanding. And I consider that spontaneous shadow work because I was able to gain insight into unconscious things that were happening. And that is the definition of our shadow work. Now, unless you do a lot of shadow work and cyclically over time, you would probably need a prompt to start out with, at least in the beginning. And so we're going to talk about that. What are we going to do if we want to try to prompt a shadow work session? And I'm just going to pause for a second and refresh the chat. Merry meet everybody. So there are a variety of prompts online, and people will often ask me, well, what are some good ones? And really, the best prompts you can find online are the ones that resonate with you. So if you Google shadow work prompts, you're going to find dozens of websites with hundreds upon hundreds of different prompts. And I did this last night, so I could see some options. And what you're going to probably find, you're going to have to scroll through it. There's hundreds of questions. You don't have to answer all of those. And some of them may not resonate with you at all or your situation. And so what I would do is I would scroll down until you find one that looks kind of interesting, and then you can start from that place. Now, the classic prompt that many people will start off with is what type of a person irritates, annoys, or triggers you the most? And so this can be a general question of just like what kinds of people get under your skin, but it also can be a more specific question. There may be a specific person in your life who kind of ruffles your feathers. And that is a good starting point. Now, what I will say is that sometimes the word triggers doesn't resonate with people and it makes it difficult for them to answer this question. But most of us have something that, like I said, ruffles your feathers. I sometimes I will post this question in our Shadow Seekers, or not our Shadow Seekers group, our Body Mind Witchcraft Facebook group, and we'll get a variety of different answers from people. And so you yourself may come up with a variety of different answers. And here's some that I've seen kind of repeated over and over. So these are people that tend to annoy or irritate us or get under our skin. So people who are rude, inconsiderate, or entitled. And as you listen to this list, you may find that some of these, you have some kind of energy. If you notice, like when you hear these words, that there's some kind of a visceral reaction, or you feel something in your body, it could be worth exploring that idea a little bit more. So rude, inconsiderate, entitled people, lazy, critical, judgmental, arrogant, flaky, narcissistic, people who take a lot but don't give anything back, liars, cheaters, people who talk down to others, and the list goes on and on and on. And what I notice when we ask that question is we get of a lot of repeated responses from people, which shows us that the human condition is very universal, right? The same things that bother one person often bother others. And I can see Corey is behind doing some crazy things in the garden right now. And anyway, there she is. Okay, so once you have kind of sat down and you're going to start an exercise like this, you want to identify these people or these traits. So again, this could be a person, a specific person in your life, perhaps your mother, perhaps your grandmother, your in-law, a neighbor, a teacher. You can go all the way back and even explore this question around somebody like a childhood teacher, a babysitter, somebody from the church, and start to think about those qualities about the person, that specifically that person, or the qualities of a person who kind of irritates you. Now, step two, what you want to do is you want to start to, once you kind of identify that place, you want to think about what quality or what about it bothers you. And so in the beginning, it may not be very clear. It may just be like, and I'll share a little bit of my own, is like it's people who cheat. It really makes me crazy when people cheat. And I had a student of several years back who literally, if he could put the energy he put into cheating on tests, into actually preparing for things in his life, I can't even imagine what kind of success he could have. Because he was so good at cheating, he could have been so good at life in general, right? And sadly, eventually he got caught at a university, no less, and it was a big scandal and everything. But for some reason, people who cheat, whether they cheat on other people, they cheat on tests, they cheat other people out of things, it just gets under my skin. And there's a reaction. And it may not be super strong because I've been doing a ton of shadow work, but nevertheless, it's there. So we start to kind of think about that quality and what about that quality bothers us so much. Now, you could start to go a little deeper with this and think about, does it remind you of someone from the past, or does it remind you of a situation in the past? So using my idea of cheaters, we might think back, or I might trace things back as far as I can remember. How far back can I remember being upset by cheaters? Can I remember some specific situations where somebody cheated in a game or cheated me out of something? So what this is going to do is it's going to help me make some important connections for my shadow work. And then from there, I can go even deeper. So that starts to help me make some connections and just to normalize this too, when you're doing this work, especially when you're prompting it like we're doing here with the prompts, you may just get some surface stuff. You don't have to go into the sessions with the expectation that you're going to solve all the problems right there. So, shadow work, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because I think that the best work that we do tends to be long term work that we do over cycle after cycle. This is going to be the lasting stuff that is the soul changing stuff. And so, in the beginning, we're just sort of prompting things. We're getting the ideas flowing. We're telling our psyche, we're telling our unconscious that we are willing to do this kind of unconscious work. And so what we do is we create receptivity when we say that, when we study this, when we practice shadow work. But we may not get a lot in the beginning. You may get a little bit. You may trace it a little bit back to a parent, someone from the church, someone from your school, but maybe you don't know quite much yet. Now you can continue to go a little bit deeper with it and then start to ask yourself, well, what characteristics do I share with those kind of people? And sometimes, this to me, this one aspect of shadow work sometimes can get people stuck because I will definitely admit that there are things in life that will bother us very deeply. And we may not have those qualities in us. Though some people would say we have all qualities within us, like the human expression is so vast that all of the qualities exist within it. But some of them, like there was someone who asked me a question about animal abuse once, and like how would you do shadow work around being upset about animal abuse? And so if you think about it, animal abuse is a universal thing that should upset most people when we think about animals being abused. Unless unless perhaps we're a bit on the sociopathic spectrum or something, we're probably most of us are going to be a little annoyed by that, or probably even more than annoyed. We're going to be very upset by it. So the thing is, there's going to be these universal things like intolerance and hate and racism and animal abuse and child abuse and spousal abuse and all of these things that are just in general going to upset us. So we might be able to, as we explore these, we may find that there's not much deeper below them. It's just those are universal things that make most people upset. But it's always worth going deeper and asking the question, does it go back anywhere? Does it remind me of another situation? Does it remind me, there's a lot of work that can be done if we're willing to explore it and not just brush it off as being just something universal that upsets everyone. Um, but so where I was going on kind of that tangent is as far as animal abuse goes, when we ask that question, what characteristics do you share with those people? Well, that one is going to be maybe too hard to answer because maybe we don't share any characteristics with people who abuse animals. So, not all the time will you be able to find that you share characteristics with the thing that is bothering you, or the person that's bothering you, or the kind of person that's bothering you. But you need to still ask the question. Otherwise, we're going to potentially miss an important part of the work. So you might ask yourself, how, when have you exhibited these traits? So I would then, if I'm using that example of cheaters, I would want to think and reflect upon any times where I have cheated. And, the reality is most of us have cheated in some way, in some small way, right? And if we just refuse to face those negative and those dark parts of ourselves, we sit there stuck. We're not making any progress. So it can be hard to ask that question. It can be hard to face that because many people don't want to explore that part of themselves. So you really want to note any resistance that you might have to this part of the exercise. So if you notice that there's things going through your mind like, I don't want to do this anymore when we get to that part, or I don't need this, or this doesn't apply to me, or how's this going to help me? If you kind of notice that, then then you definitely want to explore it a little bit deeper because your resistance is is probably some kind of protective measure that you have that the unconscious has created so that you don't go deeper. But you're here trying to do shadow work, so you've got to push through it. Um, So let's see what else. The other thing to think about too is if you get to that question and you say that nothing ever bothers you, you might want to explore that. Well, it's true that some people, have done enough work that they're not really phased by much anymore. We always have more shadow work to do. There's always something we can trace back, right? So we want to, make sure that we don't just pass over the exercise out of hand because we think it doesn't apply to us. We can create kind of these illusions that the work has already been done. We don't really have anything more to do. It tends to be in, especially in religions where there's like just, they encourage just blind acceptance of things. That tends to be very true. So if you look at people like, um, perhaps like fundamentalist Christians or something like that, there's not necessarily an encouragement to go deep, to do inner work. It's an encouragement to just kind of buy into whatever is being proselytized at that time, right? Um, so it tends to happen more with people like that who don't explore themselves at all, but it can happen to us too. So always worth digging a little bit deeper. So I mentioned, this idea about liars, cheaters, that can really make my blood boil. And in fact, here's synchronicity for you. Last night, I was doing some research for our ritual that we're doing in our Shadow Seekers membership in just an hour. And our ritual is going to honor Persephone. We're going to follow her as kind of her as the symbolic form of our shadow as it descends into the underworld, and then we're going to face some of our shadow aspects there and hopefully gain some insight when we come out of all of that. So I was Googling different things, just kind of getting some information for the ritual, getting some ideas, and I Googled. I think that by the time I got to where I discovered this, I Googled like Persephone shadow work. I believe that was all I had Googled, right? So I get about 1.5 pages through Google and I see the words, The Witch's Guide to Shadow Work. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I've been ranked in Google. So some of you may know that I have The Witch's Guide to Shadow Work. And for those who don't have it yet, I'm actually going to drop it. Let me see if I can drop it in the chat here. Here's a link to The Witch's Guide to Shadow Work. If you don't already have it, you can sign up and download it. It's a free guide that kind of starts the process of getting to know shadow work and getting to know me. Eventually, it can lead to some people joining this particular group, Body Mind Witchcraft, or coming to our YouTube channel. So anyway, I was like, this is cool that I'm ranked that high. And I didn't even do anything to get the ranking. But then as I look at the listing, I notice, well, that's not even me. It's not even my name. And I click on it, and it's coming from the website Scribed, I believe is what it was called, and it's where people can upload PDFs, and then they can be downloaded by other people. And a woman by the name of Steph Roxy, I'm going to say her name here, took my guide and put it on that website as her own. Now, left my last page on it that has my name, my picture, everything, but is passing the guide off as though it's something that she herself has created, because the whole idea of this website is you upload your own work to it. So my God, that set me into a rage when I saw that. So, obviously this is showing me there's some shadow work to be done about that. And I had already written this episode before that. So I'd already written the idea of liars and cheaters and stealers, right? Being something that is in my shadow work to work on because it bothers me so much. So obviously I want to explore this a little bit more. I went down like a rabbit hole trying to find this person or find a way that I did find a way I can report this and hopefully get it taken down. I was trying to find her at some point, but so that work distracted me from everything else I was doing, but shows me that there's something in my shadow that I need to address here. So, and want to explore a little bit more deeply. So here's the deal, though. Getting back to what we're talking about is when we do this type of work, cycle by cycle by cycle, we start to have the aha moments more. We start, like I said, that idea that I had on the beach of being able to connect my self doubt, that voice of self doubt, to my dad. When we start to do it more and more and more, those moments just come. You're not even trying to have shadow work, those moments are just coming out for you. We will start to notice that we project our unconscious or our what we consider unaccepted aspects of ourselves out onto the world. And that's what we're reacting to when we notice these things that kind of get under our skin. Now, when we resist the work, what we do is we create the illusion that all is well. And all is well, hopefully, especially if we're doing a lot of this work, hopefully all is well most of the time. But if we're not addressing any of this, all is not quite well. It may be something, kind of like I've said, an illusion we've created on the surface, but all is not well, right? So we won't do any work to try to advance our development because we think that there's nothing to work on. So that's why visiting it every cycle or every other cycle or every couple of cycles can be helpful, right? Some people just, when you do this kind of work like me, where you're teaching it to other people, you're probably more deeply immersed in it. If you're in our Shadow Seekers membership, we have all this content that is cycling through every month. Plus, we have a whole like library of videos that people can watch. So, people in a membership like that, they're more doing it more and more. But, what I challenge you, if you're not somebody who's doing the work, is try to do it this cycle. Get a prompt, ask yourself some questions, sit down with it, think about it. You don't have to do it, you don't have to come up with anything right away in those first few minutes, but just the act of starting the process is what's going to open you up and make you more receptive. Now, there are many different techniques for doing shadow work. So, for example, in our Shadow Seekers membership, some of the things that we do are we look at astrological aspects of our chart that are relevant to shadow work. So, we look at our Chiron, we look at some of our astrological returns like Saturn and Chiron and the half Uranus return. We look at retrogrades because those can be times in the cycles where we have the ability to do more shadow work, where we have the ability to be more receptive. We may look at our south node so we get some insight into past lives. And we may look at our descendant and our seventh house because that is also a place in the astrological chart where our shadow lives. We might look at archetypes, how they play out in our lives. So those are symbolic representations of energies. And some archetypes are actually personal archetypes. So like the mother, the inner child, the wise one, the wanderer, the hermit, the king, the queen, the thief. So there's all these different, there's positive and negative traits of all these different archetypes. So we might explore those. We might look at various wounds, like the father wound, the mother wound, the witch wound. So here, if you're not in our Shadow Seekers membership, I'm giving you ideas of places where you could do further shadow work. We might look at the shadow side of our chakras, so look at the shadow aspects that are connected to the various chakras. We may do past life regression to find out what parts of our shadow are connected to past life experiences, or perhaps even like cycles that we're going through life after life and lessons that we're attempting to learn over lifetimes. We may do some inner child work. So you can explore any of those things on your own or guided in our group. But if you are doing this on your own and you're just starting out, I think one of the best things you can do is reflect on the shadow work prompts, and kind of think to yourself, like, here are some other classic ones. How have I been hurt? How have I hurt others? In what ways am I inauthentic? In what ways do I judge other people? How have I been judged? Who do I feel jealous of? So that sometimes will lead us even into positive aspects of our shadow, because anything you can see in somebody else potentially exists in you as well. So if you look at someone else and you feel kind of jealousy over positive qualities they have, that means that underneath in the unconscious, you have those qualities too that you can bring out into the light. So our shadow work doesn't all have to be darkness and digging, and it can be looking for the light side of us as well. So those are some thoughts of different shadow work prompts that you can try. Now, let's segue into the shadow work now followed by releasing techniques. And I'm going to give you some ideas of some rituals that you can try, which you could follow it up with. And I'm just going to pause for a moment. I see Sonia's here and Amy as well, and Andrea. Mary, meet everybody. And Joshua's here. Um, so good to see all you guys. I wasn't sure. I see Sonia said meow meow. Actually, Corey was here in the background. So I wasn't sure if how many people would be able to join us live since this is earlier than we usually do. But it's so nice to see so many of you guys live here. Okay, so let's segue into releasing. So I think that the releasing aspect of all of this is the part that many shadow work programs or people who teach shadow work miss because they're not used to doing kind of ritualistic work like we as witches are. So I've always felt like with witches, we've got a one up on everybody because we understand how to work with subtle energy, or at least we're drawn to work with it. And so, as we start to do our shadow work, we are better able to let go of some of the things that are coming up. They're just going to kind of get in our way. So, again, to clarify, we're not releasing our shadow aspects necessarily. Like those aspects, those things that belong to us, are things that we want to try to acknowledge. We want to honor it. We want to face it, and then hopefully we want to find some positive ways to like let that out, right? To work with that aspect. So I've used this example before. The shadow aspect of aggression. Aggression is a quality in our world that many people reject. They say that's bad, right? It leads to wars. It leads to conflict. It leads to fighting. And of course, like the aggression of just taking something from someone. In our shadow work ritual that we're going to be doing in an hour with our membership, we are going to be talking about the abduction of Corey, the maiden, who becomes Persephone when she's abducted by Hades, right? That aggression of just taking something that you want. He was told that he couldn't have her, and he decided he would just take her anyway. And so, of course, these are like very negative qualities that we, at least in that form, they're not helpful to our world. But that aggression that exists within us also helps us survive because if you look in the wild, animals that have no aggression don't always live as long as ones who have a little bit of aggression, right, can take the food they need, defend themselves, right? Aggression can even be about defending ourselves and holding tight to our boundaries. So what we want to do though is we don't want the aggression to come out in negative ways. If we've got to have it anyway, we want to embody it and we want to find a positive outlet for it. And so our aggression can come out in our art, in painting. You don't even have to consider yourself an artist. You can make collages, you can draw, you can scribble, you can punch pillows, you can take karate, break boards or something like that. I like to climb mountains and get my aggression out. And these are all the positive ways, or write songs. Anybody who's listened to some of my non-spiritual music will hear that it's very aggressive because that's me getting that out in a positive way. Or perhaps we take our aggression and we funnel it into a cause, standing up for women's rights or people of color or or animal rights, right? Marginalized groups. So we don't want to let go of our shadow aspects. We want to honor them, acknowledge them, embody them, find good ways to outlet them. But there's also this negative energy and there's these negative emotions that get attached to it, like guilt and regret about things that we've done or said in the past. Like we can acknowledge the shadow aspect of ourselves that maybe was mean to somebody, when we were a kid, or maybe even after that, right? We're not perfect people, and we don't have to be. The human condition is a myriad of different colors. So we can acknowledge that I have that potential within me to be hurtful and mean. But then the holding on to the guilt and the regret and all of those and the negative energy around maybe something that we've done, that's the stuff we want to let go of. All the stuff that we don't want to take with us because it clogs up our energy. It makes it so that we can't really get an optimal flow of our energy in our bodies. So this is the stuff I want to let go of. We want to let go of. So I love to follow my shadow work with some kind of releasing. Um, so let's think about how we could do some releasing. So some techniques, I think my favorite way is burning, and I know from talking to a lot of you guys like this technique as well. So you can write down the things that you want to release, write down fears, write down negative emotions, just the energy in my body that's stuck, that's stagnant, that's holding me back, writing down all the things I want to get rid of and burning that paper. Or if you can't burn it or you don't want to burn it, you can shred it, or you can write in non-permanent ink and then you could submerge it in water and let the words just dissolve like that. You could bury it. So there's a lot of like the idea with that is that we want to destroy the paper in some way because we're getting rid of it, right? So another idea that you can do is you could send it into a cord, whether you do this mentally or you would literally do it physically. You can get a ribbon, you can get a cord. We sometimes think cord cuttings are only about like cutting people out of our lives, but we can absolutely cut like energy, negative emotions, things that are like clouding our ability to be in the flow of the cycle. We can let go of those things either physically or mentally. So you basically send those intentions into the cord. You can hold it in your hands and just think about, just like when you were writing it down on the paper, think about all those things you want to let go of and you want to release, and just infuse that into the cord, and then you can cut it. Or another thing that I like to do is tie it around, like get maybe a longer piece of ribbon or cord or string and tie it around your waist and then cut that off ceremoniously. So you would do the same thing. You would infuse it with all the things you're letting go and then cut that off of you and free yourself of those fetters. Now, another thing that we can do, and we've done this in an in-person coven ritual, is you can take a stick and and this is really fun to do with a group, is you get however many people there are, you get that many sticks and you hold one end and the next person is going to hold the other end of the stick, and so you're all connected in a circle holding these sticks. And then as you go, it comes to your turn in the circle, you say something that you're going to release and you break the stick. And it can be very, very cathartic to break things that we're letting go of. But now you can also do this, and then it would go around the circle if you were doing it in a group. But you can also do this. You're in a solitary ritual where you get a stick and again infuse it with all the things you're letting go of, contemplate that, and then break it when you're ready. So I really love that idea. Another idea that I really love that I learned from a guide of mine in Sedona is to take a stone. So we would go down to this place near the river, or I should say near Oak Creek, and meditate kind of on the things that you want to let go of, and then that you don't want to take home with you is essentially what he said. Anything you don't want to take home from Sedona with you, meditate on it. And then you go down and you pick a stone, or two or three or however many you want, and you again infuse that with the thing that you're letting go of. And then he says to stand downstream, so with the water kind of heading like towards your back, and you toss the stone downstream and then turn to face upstream, and then just let positive energy come towards you, because anything that we let go of, we have space to fill with something more positive. And that's the whole idea here, is we're letting go of this stuff so you have more room in your energetic field to fill with the good stuff. Now you can that idea of the stone, you can do it at like a creek or a river or somewhere where there's running water. You could do it at the ocean. um, I'm trying to think, if you can't get to like a natural source of water, you can also, even anything that you can't do physically, you can also always visualize yourself doing as well. There is as much, I think there is as much, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess efficacy of doing things internally in your mind as there are of doing them outside physically in the world, because our mind is so powerful. And to me, and there's studies that suggest this as well. The things that we contemplate in our mind so sometimes our mind can't even differentiate what we imagine versus what actually physically happens. So this is why it's so important to kind of when we have a lot of like negative recurring thoughts, to try to do some work on it, because they're creating our reality, right? So, but you can do this anytime there's something that, like, someone says, go to a volcano. You can't go to a volcano, but you can imagine yourself going to one, and you can do the work that way. So another thing you can do is just wash off in the shower, or wash off in the ocean or a body of water, and just imagine washing yourself clean of any of the negative energy, emotions, things you're letting go of, standing in the rain and doing that. Standing in a windy area and letting the wind blow over and through you, and imagine as it does so that it's blowing the things you're releasing behind you and away from you. So there are many different types of releasing rituals that we can do, releasing practices that will help us let go of some of that stuff that comes up during the shadow work, and then frees us of that energy so that we have more room for the energy that we really want to bring into our lives. So to review the whole process as a whole, the first idea is to identify some shadow traits that you want to work with. Identify the unconscious origins of today's problems and issues. You can do that through prompts. You can do that through other means, right? Like some of the other things I talked about earlier. But we want to identify some of these shadow traits. From there, we want to acknowledge them. We want to own them, or we want to trace them back to their origin, because sometimes the traits that we discover, they're not actually ours, because sometimes we can carry stuff that belong to parents, grandparents, great grandparents. We may find that some of this is ancestral and not all of what we're carrying is actually ours. So anything that we discover that isn't ours can then be released. Anything that does belong to us, the shadow traits that truly do belong to us, we want to acknowledge them, and then we want to honor them, right? And then we want to find some positive outlets for them. After that, we want to release the negative energy and emotions that might be tied to them, things that are clogging up the energetic body. And when you do this cycle after cycle, the work gets much easier, and you find more and more progress with it. So don't be alarmed if the first time you do it, you don't get a lot done. You may, but you also may feel like I didn't really get a lot done. But just remember, you opened the door, and that's the idea, is making you receptive to this kind of work. You opened up the door. Now, if really tough emotions come up for you, because it can, so this is a question I get asked a lot. People are afraid of shadow work. They're afraid it's going to make more problems. It's going to cause them to feel worse. And so if you notice, the reality is when we're digging down into some deep and some dark stuff sometimes. And if you notice that a lot of negative emotions and energy are arising and they're making it difficult to even continue with the work, you can try some breath work. That can definitely help. So there's something called the moon breath, or Chandra pranayam. And this is where you just close off the right nostril and you just breathe in and out of the left nostril. The left nostril connects to the left channel of our energy, which is the yin channel. And this has a more calming influence on the central nervous system. So if you notice anxiety and kind of things amplifying, try just breathing in and out through your left nostril, and it can help you with some of those feelings. Another thing you can do is a counted breath. So studies show that when we have a longer exhale, this also helps to bring down the central nervous system. So I like a counted breath of 4 and 8. So it's 4 counts on the inhale, 8 counts on the exhale. And you do that for several cycles of breath, and that also can help bring down your system. Now there's another breath called Satali Pranayam. This is the cooling breath, and it's a very good breath for bringing down hot emotions like anger, jealousy, anxiety, stuff that's agitation that's coming up when you're doing any of the work. If you can curl your tongue, what you do is you stick your curled tongue out of your mouth. You slowly inhale through the curled tongue. You close your mouth, and then you exhale slowly through the nose. Now, if you can't curl your tongue, like I can't, and it's a genetic thing, there's just people who can't, then what you do is just imagine that you were sucking the air in through a straw. And then close the mouth and exhale slowly through the nose. You do that cycle after cycle, and that can also help. And then the final thing is breathing emotions into the heart space. So this is where we absorb the emotions rather than we resist them. So it's the same mechanism that we use during our shadow work. What we resist persists. That's why if we don't face shadow traits or shadow aspects of ourselves, they'll grow louder and louder and louder, and they're going to have a deeper effect on our lives. Now, emotions are similar to this. They're very transient, and we can let them be. If we can let them be, they will often naturally resolve on their own. They're not our full state of being, right? They come and they go. So when we recoil from our emotions, though, that's when we amplify them. So if you think of like kind of a maybe something that's triggering to you or something that just brings up negative emotions, maybe when you think about something in your past and it brings up any negative emotions, you'll notice that there's this little like recoiling that we do inside. And it's because we're pulling naturally, we're just like slightly shifting away from that emotion because we don't like it. But what that does is it creates like more tension, more friction, and it just actually makes the emotions stronger. So if instead we can lean into the emotions and breathe into them, and I even like, well, when I'm doing this kind of work, I'll even like lean a little forward and take a really deep inhale, and you kind of bring that emotion into your heart space, and your heart is like an expansive ocean. It can take anything and it can dissolve it and it can transform it. And so if you breathe deeply into your heart space, breathe that emotion in instead of pulling away. And then just exhale. And as you exhale, just imagine like a drop of water being dropped into the ocean and just dispersing. And you do that over several cycles of breath, and that can really help your heart dissolve and transform some of these like negative emotions, right? So it sounds very simple, but if you try it, it actually does work. So if you are interested in going deeper with your shadow work, then I encourage you get the Witch's Guide to Shadow Work. It's in the comments. If you're watching back on YouTube, it's always in the description of the video. There's always a link where you can grab that copy. It's free. Consider joining our Shadow Seekers membership when it opens again at the end of November, because this is the kind of work that we're doing, every single month. Now, just a word about timing, because that timing gets irrelevant once this video goes into replay. But as of right now, we are recording this video on the dark moon. Now, shadow work and releasing work is naturally aligned to the waning half of the cycle, but you can do it at any time. So don't let that stop you. So what you don't want to say is, oh, I was going to do some shadow work, but it's the waxing crescent or it's the waxing moon, and therefore I'm not going to do it. So we don't want to have that be the excuse. If you want to do shadow work whenever you want. Like I told you, that those spontaneous sessions, I often have those at the full moon. So it really can be any time of the cycle. If you want to schedule your work cyclically, what I would do is I would consider doing it in the last week of the lunar cycle and see if that kind of resonates for you. Or if that doesn't really resonate for you, do it whenever you feel the urge to turn inward. So if you notice yourself kind of pulling away from people at a certain time of the cycle, or you notice like you just kind of want to be alone and you want to be in your thoughts, that's the natural urge in turning inward. If you follow that, then you're likely going to find that you'll be able to do your shadow work better because you're naturally open and receptive at that time. Now, fall and winter is an excellent time for shadow work and releasing as well. So if you think of the natural solar cycle aligned with like the lunar cycle, the solar cycles, like the part of the solar cycle that is connected to the waning part of the moon is the fall and the winter. So people just naturally tend to be more introspective during these times, so a good time for our shadow work. Okay, so I'm going to end there. I don't have any questions that were left for me today for the Q&A. If you're here live and you want to ask something, it doesn't have to be about shadow work or releasing. It could be anything about witchcraft, shadow work, energy work, anything you're wondering about. Put that in the chat. I'll stay on for a few more minutes, and then I've got to sign off and get everything set up for our Shadow Seekers Dark Moon ritual here in a bit. So let me go into the comments here. Um, so let's see here. So Joshua had said, oh, it wasn't Joshua. Stephen said that the only thing he knows about the star chart is that he's Cancer and his grandmother was into that heavily. So if you want to know more about your astrological chart, you can go to astro.com and you can get a free chart done for you there, and you'll learn more about your sun sign, but you'll also get to learn about your moon sign and your ascendant, which we consider just as important as the sun sign. You'll get to learn where your other planets are as well. um, and then Stephen also said his music gets aggressive with pent up anger. Right. And that is the whole like beauty of being able to express ourselves with art, is that we have a natural outlet that's very positive, a positive place for us to, outlet some of those feelings that we're having. Kurt said music is a great release for him. He said new metal for him in particular. Yeah, so people like my favorite type of music is industrial, and it has been since I was like a teenager. I love going to industrial shows. I love going to industrial clubs. I love that kind of music because there is anger and angst and aggression in it, and it just allows us to, kind of express those emotions, feel them in a much more positive way. Um, Okay. Oh, Nancy said, have you thought about making a copyright for the guide? Yeah, that is definitely on my mind now. I've got to do that. I wasn't even thinking about it because it's just a free guide. But then finding that this person literally took it and uploaded it onto the site was just crazy. So I'm going to explore it. I'm going to be filing a complaint to have that taken down. I did some research on that site anyway, and I heard that there's a lot of people the site itself isn't really considered very legitimate because this thing happens all the time. People take others' work and they just upload it as their own. But anyway, apparently they will do something about it and they will take it down. They said if I make a complaint, so I'm gonna do that and then probably copyright it. And but it was just definitely an eye-opening experience for me, and very interesting because that was already the type of shadow aspect I was going to talk about anyway, because it's something that irritates me so much. Um, okay, if anybody's got any questions, put them in here. I'm going to tell you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, okay? And I'll give you a little bit more time to put any questions in if you've got them. So we will be back to our usual time next week. So that's 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. Next week's episode will be working with the witch's pyramid. So I did an episode on this like 2 years ago or something, and I'd like to improve the episode and kind of re go over everything. So the witch's pyramid is an interesting way to kind of observe, to kind of look at the elements and think about how they play out in your life. And what people have found is when they kind of contemplate the witch's pyramid, they get some insight into their own magical and spiritual practice. I think it can amplify your intuition. It's just all around, it's kind of a neat exercise to do. So we're going to talk about that next week on 10/8. On 10/15, I've done an episode before on deity archetypes. Somebody's got like a weed whacker out right next to the window, so I hope that's not picking up on the microphone here. But I've done a couple of episodes on different deities, working with deities, different shadow work deities, and now I'm going to do an episode on deity archetypes. So that will be an interesting one that's coming up on 10/15. On 10/22, I'm going to be doing an episode on protection magic, which a lot of people ask me questions about. So I'm going to be sharing some ideas on some different protection practices and spells and things you can do. And then on 10/29, we'll have an episode on Samhain. So that will take us through October. At least that's my plan for right now. And then on 11/1, I believe that's going to be our date, though we haven't formally set it yet. But we will be having a public Samhain ritual online. And so for those of you who are in the Shadow Seekers membership and our coven, of course, you're coming, you get free tickets to that and to the replay. But those who are not part of either of those groups can join us as well. We'll have an opportunity where you can buy a ticket through donation and you can join us for this. We're going to be doing our traditional tolling of the bells. We'll be honoring those who crossed through the veils this year, and we'll also be aiding some of the lost souls that sort of got lost on the way there. And I believe we're going to be working with Hecate. I'm not entirely certain. We might be working with Persephone this year. But if we work with Hecate, we'll probably be traveling once again to the crossroads and doing some work there. But more information will be coming out about that ritual very soon, and we hope to see some of you join us there. Okay, so I am going to check the chat one more time. And okay, so I got a couple of questions or a couple comments here. Stephen said, "You are one of a kind." Thank you. We all are one of a kind, but thank you for that. Oh, Amy said, "I'm amazed how much your story upset me too. I want this woman's head on a platter." Yeah, I went down this hole trying to figure out who she was, and I couldn't really find her. But yeah, man, that it sure made my blood boil. Sonia said, so she said, "I've noted that my divination and intuition is significantly heightened during the full and moon. She said the dark moon accidentally, so how might I do a basic spell on purpose?" Um, I'm not sure. So it's common to have the full moon, common to have intuition heightened at the full moon, and in fact, it's very common to have the intuition heightened from the full moon all the way through the waning half of the cycle, because the veils thin ever so slightly during the waning half of the cycle, and that can help people feel more receptive to the universe and just messages that are around you at all times that you might not be picking up at maybe other times of the cycle. So very common for it to amplify during the full moon. Um, but if you want to do a spell to kind of heighten your intuition, I think that I'll tell you what, I will see what I can find in my own book of shadows specifically on heightening intuition. But what I would suggest is, just off the top of my head, is to do something surrounding the third eye. So I think like a really nice spell that would be about intuition could include some candle gazing, because that that stimulates the pineal gland, which we know is connected to the energetic third eye. That will help open it up a little bit. I think that you could also do some like third eye exercises. If you've ever done like yogic eye exercises, those are also very good for stimulating the third eye. So I would do like that stuff before I do the spell. And then from there, you can do, it kind of depends on sort of what's the catalyst you want to use. If you want to use a candle, since you're already doing candle gazing, you could do like a sigil where maybe you write, my third eye is open or my intuition is amplified, and then make a sigil out of that. You could carve that into a candle that you then use for the candle gazing. Another thing that's very good is if you can find a sage stick that instead of it being sage is mugwort, and I know that you can get them on Mountain Rose Herbs, but some metaphysical shops will also sell them. And you could do some kind of smoke cleansing with the mugwort around your aura, do the candle gazing, make the sigil to amplify your intuition, and that right there could be a really nice spell. But I'll see what else I can find for you, and then I'll add it to the chat here. Okay, so I am going to sign off now, and I will see some of you, hopefully in about half an hour, who are in our Shadow Seekers membership. I'll meet you for the ritual, and those of you who are not, I will see you next week, hopefully, in our next episode. So as always, you can leave questions and comments. Even if you're watching back in replay, I do go through and I look for the questions that I didn't get to do while we were live, and I'll answer those, or I'll include them in next week's episode. And leave a heart or a thumbs up if you like something in the video. That way we get it out to the feed of more people. And also if you're watching back in Shadow Seekers, on our Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel later, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll be notified and you'll never miss any future episodes. Okay, until next time, happy dark moon if you're watching this live, and hope you have a great rest of your evening. Till next time, blessed be.